first, let's take this sort of line item by line item, hear everyone's thoughts here. Danny, we've got Michigan -5. What are you going to do with the side here?
Lay 'em. I think this is Michigan's year. That's the challenge everybody's looking for is Washington's offensive line versus Michigan's defensive front seven.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're both elite, but I do think they're going to be able to get to Michael Penix. Any good quarterback, no matter how good they are, I think you're thrown off your game by pressure. And I think they're able to do that. I think there'll be some big plays for Washington, but I think they'll be able to prevent like the big plays. I think they can kind of maybe even play that bend, don't break, like don't get down, to the end zone, or let them get down to the red zone, get red zone stops, force field goals. Those are wins. And I don't think we're talking enough about the other side of the lines of scrimmage. I think Michigan's going to be able to run the football against Washington's defense, play keep away. I think it's going to be a heavy dose of Blake Corum, and I think they're just able to lean on Washington. I think if Michigan doesn't have those, screw ups throughout the game, I think they beat Bama by 2 touchdowns, possibly 3. And that game's not even close. I just think they're the better football team, so I'm going to lay them with Michigan.
Agree.
Hey, and let's go historical trends here. 2019, LSU is a 4.5-point favorite against Clemson. They win 42-25. In 2020, Alabama is a 9.5-point favorite against Ohio State. They win 52-24. 2021, Georgia, 2.5-point favorite against Alabama. They win 33-18. And of course, we remember Georgia as a 13.5-point favorite. They win 65-7. That is 4 straight years of the college football playoff national championship favorites. And not only winning the game and covering the spread, but covering the spread by at least 12 points. I am not sure about covering by at least 12 points. But there might be something to be said about the team that is better after pouring everything out and getting rid of, and this stood out to me a lot talking to Washington's players after the win. They weren't blaming the long layoff. They were acknowledging that they were not crisp, and I think that Michigan probably might say some of the same thing with some of the mistakes that they were making. So you've gotten all that out of the system. You've gotten the short 1-week turnaround, so you're back into a game week mentality where you don't have to go and sit on your hands even for an extra 3 days. You're coming right back in your regular season mode in terms of your calendar. That's what I would point to in terms of this recent trend, that semifinals, you work it all out of the system. By the time you show up to the championship game, the better team on paper has won. That better team on paper is Michigan. I'm going to lay the points with Michigan as well.
I just think I'm not confident in either side, especially when it comes to the spread. I'm not that confident in the winner, although I do think Michigan will win more often than not. But when I look at the matchup, the things I keep coming to that make me lean towards Michigan are that we can talk about Penix, Odunze, McMillan, Polk, and they're great. We can talk about how Michigan hasn't faced that offense in an offense like that this year. They haven't, but they faced it before. They faced it the last few years against Ohio State. And they beat Ohio State up. And that's what I think they are going to try to do to Washington. And I think Michigan's secondary this year is better than the secondary it's had the last couple of years. So I think that is a factor that they're not going to completely shut them out, because you can't, but they are going to slow them down. And I do think they have the defensive personnel to kind of, like you were saying, Danny, make them play the bend but don't break. Where I think Washington is truly screwed here is that, as far as matchup is concerned, is Michigan does not have an explosive run game. Like, the Blake Corum injury completely kind of sapped that from them this year. They are a down by down, don't lose yards, stay on schedule, power rushing offense. It's what they've done all year. They don't need to hit the home run. They're just trying to get 3-4 yards, lean on you, wear you down, bleed the clock, and break you in the second half. Washington's defense against the run ranks 130th nationally in success rate against the run. That means Washington's defense is routinely giving up 3 yards, 4 yards, 5 yards, letting you stay on schedule when you run against them. Michigan will be more than happy to take advantage of that. And I think that the way their offensive line performed in the Rose Bowl gives me a lot more confidence going into this matchup than what I had going into the Rose Bowl in them, because I thought they played very well. And I just think Michigan is going to come into this game the same way it did most of the season and try to shorten the game, figuring the best way to keep Washington from scoring is to keep them on the sidelines and just control the ball, control the clock, and sit on them. And I think that more often than not, they will be able to do it. But if J.J. McCarthy makes a mistake like he nearly did on the very first possession against the Rose Bowl, if you fall behind Washington, I don't know if Michigan can climb its way out. So to me, that's going to be pivotal if I'm the Huskies. I need to get an early lead because I need to be able to kind of start the avalanche on them. And if they don't, Michigan's going to make it really hard for them to come back to.
Yeah, I don't show like a real bettable edge on this. I think we have a fairly good feel for what the ceilings of these teams are. I would expect both of them to play, about at their ceiling. I mean, if you make Michigan like a, I don't know what, like a 29.
Well, don't power numbers have Michigan as like a 10?
A 10. A 10 is like
no, not a 10, a 10-point favorite. Like the idea is that this spread has been adjusted based on raw power numbers because of how special Michael Penix and the passing offense is. That you can't throw that out there realistically, knowing the explosiveness and like what we're dealing with, especially coming off that game, or at least the market's perception of that. Like I want to say SP Plus had it at 12, like Michigan minus 12 or something like that.
Well, that's why I'm saying that you need to throw that stuff out. And I not throw SP Plus out, but you need to basically take and put teams at their ceiling if they're playing for a national title, because you have to sort of give them the benefit of the doubt that they're going to play like they're playing pretty close to what their best is. Right. A season-long power rating is going to be baking in some things.
15-7 against Arizona State.
Correct. Right. Where like Washington won't come out and say it, but Penix mysteriously played like he was hurt for like 5 weeks.
Right.
Like if forced to press and bet the game, I would bet some Michigan, because I do show, like on pure numbers, I still show a little bit of a Michigan edge. I'm going to pace it down a little bit. Washington plays very slow. Michigan also plays really slow tempo wise. Like they both take a lot of clock. So it's probably fewer possessions than normal. But it's a real small edge for me. I would rather bet Washington team total under if I think Michigan's going to win the game, because I don't think Michigan's going to score 50. Maybe they will. They certainly could.
That's not the way that
I think Michigan even wants to score 50.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
I also kind of just back on protecting Michael Penix and the matchup that we're going to see there. The Dylan Johnson injury. It's what was it? The X-rays came back negative, so it's not as bad as we thought. I don't know if he's. I mean, I saw him like you guys all did at the end of that game. Did not look like he was feeling great. Granted, we've seen guys come back before, but if he's the shell of himself, not that you would be able to run, but also in pass protection, that's where I think it could hurt him as well, because he's been pretty solid in pass protection, picking up linebacker blitzes and recognizing them, getting the right guy. And there's a pretty, big gap in playing time between Dylan Johnson and the rest of the Husky backs. So I think that's another area where it concerns me, even if he's not, if he's playing, but he's not 100%, I think it's a big loss more than just the production in the running yards. I think it's also in pass protection.
Johnson had 2 touchdowns, but only had 49 yards on 21 carries, 2.3 yards a pop in that game. It wasn't like he was ripping them off the same way that he was against Oregon, against USC. It wasn't the massive performance that, of course, being held by Michael Penix. I want to shout out the Washington fans that rock with us, by the way.
Yeah, it feels bad. Like, and everybody's saying
we were just doing this again,
right?
Kyle and Gary specifically, like they were like, "Yo, Chip, cover 3," in the stands before the game, shouting at me on the sidelines. I go over to talk to them, and they were so nice, and they said they loved it. And he's like, "And y'all pick against us every single game, and you did again. And guess what, Kyle? Guess what, Gary? We're doing it again. I can't believe it. But look, it's not that I would love to be wrong. But if Washington wins, it's because it means we've seen something special. That's what if Washington wins this game, then Michael Penix has put together an all-time playoff performance. These wide receivers go out there and just sort of overwhelm Michigan with their playmaking. Bud mentioned in the big game breakdown, is it possible that those receivers are going to make those contested catches as well as they did against Texas? Is Michael Penix going to be so dialed in? Like, is he just seeing the matrix right now that his ball placement is going to be so perfect for a second game in a row? The odds say no, but if he is, then we've seen something that is like an all-time type performance. And I like seeing greatness. So if Washington wins and I'm wrong, I'm fine, because it means we've seen something awesome.
And I mean, I do think they're going to make contested catches.
Yeah,
they've done it. Like their contested catch rate is nuts all year. Is it going to be like as perfect as it was against Texas? That is probably the question, right? And does it have to be? I don't know. Like, I don't think it's disrespectful to Washington that most of us think that Michigan is likely to win the game. Nobody would like bet your house, I don't think, on Michigan winning the game, right? Like, it's a really fun, good matchup. Penix has played like crazy good. All of the reports that we got in preseason that Jim Harbaugh, I think he actually just said this, that he expects to break the all-time single draft record for draft picks. Well, you know what? He said that in the preseason. Michigan went out and played like they did and steamrolled everybody. We got word early in the year from a coaching buddy of mine. It was like, I think Michigan has the guys that people normally assume Georgia thinks they have. Like, the stuff we hear, we're seeing play out on the field.
It's 2-14-0 teams. You know?
Yeah. Like, and Washington is a great fan base, by the way. Like, I love watching. That's like underrated nastiness. Them and Oregon going back and forth it's great.
And it'll be
there on the West Coast, just not everywhere on the West Coast.
And listen, it'll be great when they're lining up on the Big Ten on CBS in 2024.
Oh, Tony Petitti's just sitting back in the cut, and like, you think he's texting thank you? Like, hey, what do you guys have to do this weekend?
Tony also wants you to mention, Chip, that they'll be on other networks too.
Well, listen, I'm actually don't get in trouble. I think we'll see a lot of Washington. So, it'll be great. We'll get a lot of Washington, and we'll be dialed in for the Will Rogers era. Okay, total 55.5, a shade under a key number of 56. Tom, what do we do with the total?
I like the under. I think because of the way Michigan's going to try to play this game, I think, like I just went over, I think they'll be effectively able to run the ball, and I think they'll be able to bleed clock, and I think that they will do as good of a job as reasonably can be expected of limiting the explosives that Washington so routinely gets. Although, fun fact, do you know Michigan has a higher explosive rate in the passing game than Washington does? Just throwing that out there. It's just they don't throw nearly as often. So it's a volume versus an efficiency thing. But I think it'll be the under. I think Michigan will control the clock most of the time. And I think most people are assuming that if it is under, Washington can't win. I don't buy that at all. We've talked about it. They beat Arizona State 15-7. Washington has won 3 games this year without scoring 25 points. They're capable of winning a rock fight if they have to. It's just not the preferred style of play. So I think even if Washington wins this game, the under can still safely hit.
Oregon State and Washington State, 2 last regular seasons of the game, did it, fairly lower scoring. Both would have been under this total significantly. I'm with you. I mean, if you like Michigan and you think about the way we've broken this game down, I think you have to say under as well. It makes me a little bit nervous later in the game, like that backdoor, late touchdown, kind of slinging it around. If they stop blitzing, if they're playing more prevent, do they scheme something up? But what was the number? Was it Washington team total under?
Yeah. What is it sitting like 20, probably 24.5, 25?
Yeah, I kind of like that one.
Bud, what you do anything with full game total?
If I had to bet it out, I would kind of lean under, but
Boy,
know, I
Bud's
really
Mr.
didn't-
Cop Out today show. I tell you what, if I had to bet it, we're all laying it on the line.
I bet some bowl games and bet more second halves and stuff in bowls. And I just, these feel like they're pretty correctly lined,
Yeah.
To me,
I would
I
love to. I would
as
love
they
to-
should be.
Yeah.
Like if your job is setting a line on one game that we have tons of data on,
Yeah,
I
well,
would love
catch
to
me
be
on
wrong.
CBS Sports HQ leading up to kickoff. I'm gonna have about 9 bets for you. So last game of the season, baby. We're just cutting it in for.
Nobody's going to remember the ones I got wrong because it'll be 6 months before I give them out again. Just
I would
a
love
change
to
of
be wrong and see
subject
it be
here.
a field goal game. Love it.
Yeah.
Change of subject here, just reading the comments and during the show all day. I love the fact that we have reached the national title game. We have 2 14-0 teams, 2 teams who have repeatedly proven it over and over again all year. And there are still people in the comments like, well, they haven't played anybody yet.
That is
It
great.
kills me. Like, they just beat Alabama. They just beat Texas. They beat Ohio State before that. They beat Oregon twice. They've beaten all these. Well, we still don't know. They haven't played anybody.
I do think like if you went based on resumes, like who has done more versus more, Washington should win the game, right? Like they've played in the best conference from start to finish. They went undefeated in the best conference this year. But I'm just like, if you were going with they haven't played anybody, I think that's more of a legitimate criticism of Michigan, right? Clearly they've played people because of their last, 3 out of the last 4 games.
Yeah,
Well, I would think at this point Michigan has a higher strength of schedule than Washington does.
I would say that if Michigan had not had the game it had against Alabama, and you wanted to pitch me on if this game is close, Washington's proven it with 10 straight wins by 10 points or less, I'd buy it. But that win against Alabama required every bit of late game execution on the field, good play calling on the sidelines, and being able to rise up in the most important moment when that Michigan defensive line is, pushing around Alabama's offense on key plays coming down the stretch in overtime. So, yeah, I'm not going to put as much into that just based on how the Rose Bowl went for the Wolverines.
I just think you can say that Michigan's beaten 2 top 5 teams, and Washington hasn't beaten 1, although they did beat Oregon twice. So it's like, and when it comes to the strength of schedule thing, again, I'm not so sure that holds weight anymore.
All right. What about any quarter halves? And Bud says a little Washington team total under. First half under. Punch it, feeling each other out.
No, see, that's the thing. I don't think Washington's going to come out trying to feel anybody out. I think Washington's going to come out foot on the gas.
And do they?
I think they have to.
As a great offensive schemer, does he? You get a couple plays early because you've seen something that Michigan has to adapt to. Does that turn into a big play? Makes me a little bit nervous that too for Washington.
So DeBoer is a really good scripter.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. If you watched his halftime interview in that game, he was like, yeah, we just kind of wanted to come out and see how they'd play us and stuff. I'm like, yeah. Bro, you guys score on your opening drive like all the time. So you must see how they're playing. You're like, yeah, here's a touchdown for you. See this. So yeah, I would prefer full game under to first half under.
Washington first quarter.
First quarter, there's a way to bet first quarter. Correct. Tom just did it. Yeah. it's to have somebody at a ball game with one of these.
Is
in
the
their ear.
coin weighted? Can you tell me what it's going to be?
Washington first quarter plus 1.5. You just need it tied or Washington lead.
Why not?
Yeah, right?
0-0, 3-3.
7-7.
Yeah.
Each of them gets a score on the board. I could see 7-7. That was my I had first quarter over in Washington, Texas. It was over 13.5. 7-7 brings it home. All you need is you need each team to get a touchdown. Let's go. Buckle up.